welcome again to this open space. Consciousness is on air. Today, for the first time, we are making this whole show in English, which I think is amazing because we always have a lot of English speakers. And today, for the first time, they can interact directly in the chat with other questions, with everything that they want to interact with. Por ellos que están escuchando en español, hay traducción. Hoy estamos haciendo esta emisión en inglés y por ellos que quieren sumirse, hay un link para traducción en el chat y pueden escuchar en la misma manera en que normalmente escuchan los ingleses. Es una experiencia diferente y hoy pueden aprovechar de esta experiencia. I just invited the Spanish speakers to today experience this emission in the way that normally the non-Spanish speakers, so all of you, are joining this transmission. Today, we want to make a summary or a discussion round on what we've talked about in the last couple of days in the emissions with Alberto on Air about men and women. What ideas do we have about men? What ideas do we have about women? And how do these ideas impact our daily life? And so today we are together with the round of women and one man. We are with here. Well, my name is Iris. Next to me I have Amalia, Victoria, Laura, and on my left there's Fabian. Thank you all for being here. And before we start, I would like to invite everybody to say a few words about themselves and to make a very short statement. What is for you the most confronting thing you're living in this experience right here, right now? What you would perceive as being confronting because of your idea that you have about women or men. And I would like Laura to start.
Okay. Thank you, Iris, for the introduction. And thank you also for impulsing and incentivizing that we make this live broadcast in English for the first time. I love it, actually. I've always had a lot of contact with the international part of Inner Mastery of all our work. And it's true that it was a little bit lacking when we didn't invite them in a direct way. The translations are wonderful, and we have amazing translators. I'm actually one of them. But beyond that, it's definitely a warmer and closer experience when you receive things directly in your own language. So I wasn't expecting the question. I'm normally the one to ask questions. It's also a safe space. But it is true that what Iris has asked is very precise and very fitting. What I'm finding very confronting and what I found very confronting about the space that was opened to go deeper into the interaction of men and women is becoming more and more aware of the way that my thoughts take on a life of their own, so that they are creating a reality of how I look at people. It's as if the way that I look is an effect of the way that I think. And once you realize that, or once I realized that, there is very little credibility that I can give to my thoughts, or to the way that I look, because everything I see is, I'm not sure about the percentage, nor does it really matter, but it's, let's say, highly contaminated by thoughts that belong to a past that I'm not even aware of because of how subtle and how unconsciously it it became a part of my thought process. I think would be the way. It's a thought process. It's a mechanism. It's the way in which I think is creating the way in which I look at men and at women, and I can no longer give credibility to that. And I'm very confronted because I don't know if I'm very confronted yet. When I have more clarity about it, I'll probably be a lot more confronted. Right now, I'm still navigating a place of somewhat confusion where you can still procrastinate a little bit. At least for me, the more clear I am about a certain comprehension, the more confronted I am, because I have no more excuses to not implement them directly in my day-to-day life. But it's definitely no longer giving credibility to the way in which I look. So to see, said otherwise, the way in which I perceive people around me, no longer giving credibility to what I think, what I believe, and also seeing how there's a part of me that wants to find a new way of thinking. Like the sheer emptiness of not having a way of thinking is not enough. So I need to grasp in order to create new beliefs.
Thank you, Laura. You gave a lot of things to talk about already. What I perceive is that in theory, the statement you just made could lead you to a place of desperation and distrust, because you're saying, I can't trust in whatever I think, I can trust in whatever I see, basically, because what you see is contaminated by your thoughts. But I don't perceive you in a place of desperation or distrust.
No, I'm not feeling particularly despaired.
No. And for me, the place that this comprehension could lead us to is also a place of taking responsibility, taking charge. Because in there you're saying that, well, I can actually see my thoughts and I can see how they contaminate what I see, so I can take charge of what I'm thinking.
I also once read in, anyway, it's a Spanish book by quite a well-known author called Torquato Luca de Tena. And it was a book about teenagers, but he's a philosopher, so it's quite deep. And in the prologue, actually, I read a phrase that brought a lot of clarity. And he said that maturity is the distance you create between what's happening and your emotions. And that to reply or somehow add to what you said about desperation, it's probably that the more distance, and I don't mean a wall or a, let's say, unhealthy or cold or disconnected distance, but the more distance you can place between what you're seeing and realizing that this whole mechanism, then the more space is created for oxygen, so that you don't go into that despair that comes from being identified also with the person who doesn't trust that, whatever that is.
Thank you, Laura. So the most confronting would be seeing yourself think.
Seeing how I think, but yes, somewhere along there.
Thank you. What's the most confronting for you, Victoria?
Well, in this moment, the most confronting for me is actually to allow myself to have this distance. Exactly what Laura was saying. The distance between the situation and my emotion. A safe space where I can just breathe into it. I realize that most of all about men, I have very conditioned thoughts. And before some months ago, I really believed to this thought. For me, were the truth. Right now, I see that are conditioned thoughts, are still rocks, but I can see them at least. Anyway, they're still, anyway, I'm still reacting to something that I feel when I perceive something against this thought. So I'm still conditioned. I still don't have this distance, but at least I can see them. And it's also it's it's like a layer. I I I I can feel it as a layer, as a plastic wrap. With men, has been manifested in the past month, and it brought me also to observe it with others people. Uh, and, and it's about also to expecting the worst. It's a layer also because the part of me always expects the worst to happen, and it's nice to see in this moment how it is not like that. And I mean, there's no difference. There's not a lot of difference between man and woman in this moment. It's just a grab that is little by little taking distance from my skin.
It's like peeling the onion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reminds me of what Alberto sometimes says is that at some point you can start distrusting the distrust. So the moment that you can start to see your distrusting thoughts, you can actually use that distrust to distrust the distrust. And then you can use that energy to actually come to trust.
I was having this image while Vittoria spoke about this layer because I was reading yet another medical article about coronavirus this morning. I'm reading a lot about this virus because from the beginning I had this clear vision how the virus wasn't the virus. How it was bringing a message, like, I'm not going to say a metaphor because it's very real, but we could give it a metaphorical vision by what is it that the message, the deep, let's say, spiritual or energetic message that this virus is bringing us. And just in what I was reading today, I read that the recent discoveries is that the virus is eroding, like destroying a layer, but that's not on top of the veins and the arteries, it's inside the veins and the arteries. So it's as if this virus is slowly affecting the deeper layers that, well, in what Victoria was, I think it was sharing, we could bring it to the deeper parts of her belief system about men and women, because we already saw throughout this week that what we were sharing was bidirectional. The way that women think about themselves is affecting the way they think about men, and for men it's just the way that women think about them. So once again, I'm seeing how this, this metaphor of slowly, I think peeling is almost too gentle a word by now, because in a very short span of time, we're talking 6 weeks, there's been like very, very deep impacts into the most consolidated parts of our conditioning. Like holes are being born into our belief system, thought mechanism, thought patterns.
Amalia, how are you living this confinement, and what is the most confronting for you?
I actually do not feel confined, first of all. I do not feel a difference from when the confinement started. to the way I was living before in one of our epicenters. I can see the difference when I look at other people and the comments they make, but not in my life directly. Um, However, I am feeling the confrontation of all the thought structure that's being moved by the virus. Anguish, fear of what will come, fear of losing your job, fear of I can connect to that from time to time, but then it just seems surreal. I don't know. I'm not really, maybe I'm not really connected to what's happening. And regarding the confrontation of my thoughts on men and women, since as of being a part of the organization, so about a year ago, I started seeing how I was completely blinded on what I thought of men and women. I had the complete opposite thoughts of what actually was. So I was a kind of person that always thought that women were victims, not as in physical abuse, but they're always going to be cheated, they're always going to be used, and men are only after sex. That was my vision. And I actually realized that it's not at all the case. That in my case, it was actually the other way around. I would be seeing men only as objects or pieces of meat. And I was defending women, even though all my friends would be showing me that they're actually not being very nice to their boyfriends or husbands. But I would not want to see it. I would just go, it's just her, she's going through something. And now I'm just unraveling that all of this is completely the other way around. And I'm like, now I see it. I don't choose to believe or not, it just is. But at first I would be finding excuses. No, it's no, he's just weird. But generally men are still just after sex. They're mean. You know, you have to be careful. And I don't know how it happened that I just slowly eased into this new reality, which is the one that I'm living, where men are they just are in need of love and contact. And women are very manipulative. And yeah, that's kind of, it's not confronting me anymore, but it was a confrontation at first, definitely. And I'm also seeing how I used to think that for me, my world, what I cared about was men, being for men to look at me, for men to desire me, or to share with men. And it's actually about women. I actually do not want to be seen or not seen by men. I just want to have a relation with women. And I didn't know this. I actually felt that I didn't care about women. And I completely do.
Thank you, Amalia, for that and for something that gives me a head start for something that I could share about my own confrontation because it fits a lot to the topic that you're just sharing. Um, what I've actually, well, it's what you said, and together with what Laura said as well, it's the realization of what I've been thinking, and it's more about like seeing myself for I don't even want to say for who I truly am because it's also not who I truly am, but to see what thoughts I used to have about myself, about women, and about men, and how I was lying to myself and lying to others, but not wanting to see that I actually also did see a similar structure like you. Like I was the one seeing the men as someone I would use or I would have have a benefit from in a way by thinking I was a victim, but I wasn't, and using it to confirm my own belief about myself and the world and all of that. And I'm actually being confronted by now being in a connection with a man who actually demonstrates me that it's not the case. Who I'm almost rejecting because of the way that he loves me. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're not fitting into the box that I have. You're not a man in the view that I had about men. It's not, yeah, it's like that, like seeing the confrontation and being proven wrong in a way. Yeah. What about you, Javier?
So first of all, I want to say thank you that I can be here with you, with 4 beautiful women, and to talk about this important subject. And well, for me right now, the most confrontational thing is and has been in the last time not to let what is happening on the external determine and influence my internal state. And I've realized that this is actually what is happening, that I give my power away to the external. I go into a place of victim when I'm not conscious of it, because there are old patterns, old conditionings that are activated, and this is happening on many small situations even, and without realizing it, I'm drawn into a certain thought pattern or into a certain conclusion I had reached a long time ago, maybe, and which might be not at all accurate or helpful in this moment. And what I realized is that with taking the responsibility and being conscious of my thoughts, of the veil that I put on whatever is happening, that I can get this power back. But this can be very, very confronting. And this is the place I'm at the moment, because it's not that once I realized this, that all the conditionings are gone. It's more the opposite. It's like now that I can see them, they come or seem to come back with a greater strength and demand their former superiority. But I realized that in really going inside and finding my center, breathing, not believing, like Laura said in the beginning, not believing what might come up in my thoughts, that I can go back and can find my center, be centered. And this is especially, because the topic is men and women, especially when I'm with a woman or when I see that there's something, what does she think about me, or did I do it wrong again, or thoughts like that come up in everyday situations, and that make me kind of go into a position of wanting to do things right, wanting to make it right. And I noticed that this is not the path to go. Also, to start to analyze and try to find out what's going on, what is happening, and this is also not a place to go for me, because this I realized that this doesn't lead to any place of for me to find a relief. For me, the way I found is to really breathe, go inside.
You're on air.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Because you started saying that you realized that you were giving your power away to the external. What in this case would be the external?
I mean, you can make many examples. For example, the most common thing that many people experience right now might be coronavirus. The situation that many are living, some things that are appearing. Maybe you had, or I had something in mind that I wanted to do, and now I cannot do it because of that. So the initial thing is going to the victim role, maybe the condition. Yeah, there's something happening. I don't have any control over it. But by making this internal switch to take, okay, I'm responsible for what's happening. Actually, it's like the whole perspective changes, and it's like the energy totally turns 180 degrees.
I think you're very skillfully not really answering my question.
I was
But
gonna
it
say
doesn't
the
matter.
same.
It doesn't matter because my question wasn't asking for a name and surname, although it might have sounded like that. The other day, I was watching baby Rio, who's now 5 months, and he was just discovering his feet. I don't know if any one of you were there. And I said to Alberto, look, he's just discovered his feet a few days ago. And Alberto said something, he said I don't remember if he said it's the second or the third thing that you discover as external from you. He said the body. So then the first thing that you discover or that you identify as external from you or separate as a baby is your mother. Then either the second or the third thing, I don't remember the order, is your body. And then the third thing are your emotions. And I found this very interesting because although maybe initially we think that, oh, we're giving the power away to, to someone else, to Victoria, for example, just to name a name, what if I started reflecting on the fact that the external that I'm really giving my power away to are actually my emotions, not the person.
Yeah.
Or the factor.
That's true. Yeah. So, I realized that when, because that's the thing, the emotions are that I feel when something on the external is happening, and it's exactly like you said. Then the challenge is, because we're talking about the challenges, not to give my power to the emotions I have.
Yeah. Because as long as we think that the problem is that we react emotionally because we give our power away to an external person, we're still completely identified with the emotions as if they were an intrinsic part of our internal reality, which they somehow are because we're so identified with them.
I think this is very interesting, and there's a danger there. There's like, yes, it's true that it's important to realize that we're identified with our emotions, but what I realized in myself is it's something that leads me to rejection. That I'm saying, oh, I don't want to be identified, so I'm not feeling this. So I'm actually sad, but I don't allow myself to feel sad because I don't want to be identified. How do you see that? Like what?
Like a mental wank.
It's like a mental. It's like it's what happened to me a lot in the beginning, and that led me almost to like what we call a spiritual bypass. Well, it led me to a spiritual bypass because I thought I was so evolved and I wasn't identified, and until I realized that everything that I had done in this path of inner evolution had happened in my mind, because I was not allowing myself to feel what was happening. And something that you said this morning triggered me, because you said, I'm trying to not be affected by this. And this could be the attempt to not be identified, or it could be actually the rejection.
I actually suggested that we had to change the word spiritual bypass to intellectual bypass. Mm-hmm. Because like spiritual,
there's nothing spiritual.
Yeah, there's nothing
It's
spiritual. It's not even, it's like such a grandiose, oh yeah, I have a spiritual bypass. In reality, it's all happening in my mind. It's only been a proposal, it's not been approved.
Yes. So exactly what you just said, I think, is where the challenge is. Because if I were able in this moment to really just not feel it and just put it aside and, I don't know, don't look at it, then probably I could pretend I'm totally fine and go along. And maybe at a later point it might come up. But actually I'm allowing myself to feel whatever is happening, and that's what's so challenging for me. And still not react.
I just had an image come to mind, as if I were in a space, I don't know, yay big, and there was a huge door, and it opens, and you've got water flowing very, very fast and strong. And I'm there standing and just doing all the strength to just stand my ground. You've got the water flowing, as if that water were the emotions that are coming from outside. I'm in the middle, and I'm standing my ground. But if I let myself go with the flow, with the water, it would take me somewhere where I would eventually land and see something different. It's like being in the middle of, I'm gonna feel, but not let myself be like overwhelmed by it. Makes me just stay in the middle, seeing the emotions, not being able to close the door, and not going anywhere. Just using a lot of energy to stay there. Where, as if maybe instead of fighting or saying, I don't want to identify, if that's not possible right now, taking the other way, just letting go and see where that takes you. Because that may take you to seeing something of where it comes from. I don't know if it makes sense.
Does anyone of you want to say something? Yes, I totally can see what you're saying there. And for me, this leads me to a place of surrender of what's actually happening in the moment, and also to a place of powerlessness in a sense, because I cannot change it. I mean, I can only allow it. I can feel it. I can observe it, but I cannot change the external, or I even cannot change my emotions, what also might be seen as something external. And you see, okay, those are emotions. They are somehow there, but I'm not identified. But still, I feel them, and this can be very challenging.
I would like to go back to something that Laura said in the very beginning. You said it very nonchalant. You said that we've been talking about what women think about themselves and about men, and then you said, "Oh, but for men, it's just what women think about them." Can you elaborate on why doesn't it matter what the men thinks about themselves?
I don't remember saying that it didn't matter.
Well, you said it's for men. It's mainly. You said for men, it's mainly what women think about themselves, about them.
I really didn't say it didn't matter at all. But it's I was actually reflecting from the moment that Amalia spoke. How subtle and twisted the mechanisms can, complex, the thoughts that were implanted can be. Like they can reach such a nuclear level that it can be, like the layer that's inside the vein instead of being the more apparent outside of the vein. And I was thinking how, for example, in my case, this subject has always been very confusing because my father, for me, was like, wow. There was never not a single issue between me and my father. And my mother, although I could see how dysfunctional in some ways the relationship was, never spoke a single word against my father. So it took me quite a long time to realize that the issue or the association I had done was not with father, but with the man. Because I never associated my father with a man. So it's like fathers have a very, very, very high position in my life. So it would be very easy to say, because fathers have such a high position in my psyche, men have a very high position in my psyche, but it's not. It's fathers. And then if you observe, I always see Bruno as an amazing father for Liana, but clearly we're separate. So clearly, as the respect and the value, or the way in which I look at him, let's say it this way, the manner in which I look at him as a father is like impeachable. But the way in which I look at him as a man is where the contamination is. And I can see very clearly how the thought that my mother had about her husband has been implanted in me. And we've always spoken about how your mother implants the thought you have about men through the way in which she talks or about the father. So for me, I created an internal dissociation between the thoughts I had about men and the thoughts I had about my father. Whereas clearly what my mother thought about her husband was that she had to be in charge of everything, that he was useless, that if she wasn't the one directing, nothing would happen. Which those who know you can see how that is, in a nutshell. However, fathers are a different species. There's fathers and there's men.
It's very interesting. I've never thought about just separating this, like to separate the figure of the father of the men, because I used to think that it's the same. I don't actually even know how it's in my case. In my case, there was no men, but there was also no father. So maybe in that case it's the same, but I don't actually know. How would it be then? So you would say that the father is not a man?
Perhaps I could bring it down to that. But basically what I was confronted with, let's say, was to really realize that just because I have a high respect for fathers doesn't mean that I have a high respect for men. Just because I don't want to control someone in their father role doesn't mean that I don't want to control a man. Just because I don't have judgments. And what's coming to me is that, there's fathers like Bruno who are very involved, and there's fathers who are really not involved. And I don't have a judgment against either the one who's not involved, the one who abandons, the one who leaves. Fathers are like untouchable. In some sense. Not that would be like very exaggerated, yeah, but in some way. So it was let's say a sophisticated way of self-deceiving myself about what I truly emit when I'm in a relationship with a man, which is where all the control, the judgment, the ideas, the manipulation comes in.
But it's interesting the difference between father and man. It happens also with women. You know how, I don't know in Europe how it is, but in South America, once you're a mother, you're like untouchable. Doesn't matter what you did before. It's the motherness value that you now have, like the fatherness value, right? You do not touch a mother. And if you're not a mother, then yeah, you can be a whore or you can be lost. But if you have a kid, it changes. Even if you're a horrible mother, it doesn't matter. You've got a child. And it's also a disassociation.
A very superficial and fake one somehow, but
what you said before about the self-image of man, maybe I can say something to that as a man here in this round. And, well...
Do you feel like you're in a boxing
No, I feel pretty comfortable, actually.
Good.
Thank you. Yes, I saw the value of what Alberto said with that the men liberate themselves when they free themselves of what the woman thinks about them, more or less like that. Because I realized that having a self-image, let's say, even if it's a positive one, let's say, I'm so great, whatever, I'm such a beautiful man, I do this and that, I'm so productive, whatever. Then if I think that, some things might happen that don't go in accordance with my belief about myself. And then I invest a lot of energy in trying to defend that self-image and then I start to argue, I start to whatever, get aggressive, maybe, I don't know. But the true freedom for me really lies in not having a self-image. Sounds weird maybe, but I realized that naturally I'm in a state of flow, and everything's, I'm free basically. I mean, this is not always the case, because there are emotions that can be this and that, but I don't need a self-image to be truly aligned with myself and to be happy.
I want to make a picture of you with that statement, and we can make an advertisement for open space. I don't need a self-image to be happy. I think it's amazing. Thank you. I got stuck with this father-man dissociation. I don't know if we have to go deeper there or not, but what comes to me is that the image of the father comes from your own interaction with him, whereas everything you learn about a man as a child has to do with your mother.
Yes, also. But I can still clearly see how my mother implanted in me the idea she had about her father, who was the best man in the world for her. So that, it's as if to say that we always think that conditioning is placing judgmental or negative ideas, but it goes both ways. So knowing that it goes both ways sometimes can help in detecting. Because otherwise you just think, oh, because I don't have an apparent negative judgment about this, it's mine. It's my idea. It's not conditioned. But maybe it's not. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Because, I mean, I did have this realization like 10 minutes ago. So it's like we say, fresh. It's fresh.
It's like saying I'm believing my own thoughts if they're positive thoughts. If
yes.
There's something good. If I believe something is good for me, it must be true.
It's like cataloging. And I remember in my third retreat, back in 2014, October, we were in Switzerland, and the integrator was Oscar Gomez, who some of you have met and most of you have not. And when it was my turn to share, I said, well, a lot of things happened last night, but the most important thing, and he stopped and he said, the mind who catalogs and classifies things as more or less important is the mind of a controller. And and I think that until that exact moment, I didn't realize that I was a controller. Because I was so open-minded that I could see the more, the less, like such a myriad of things. So yes, it's somehow the same thing. Classifying the good and the bad is also a way of controlling. It is the way, the woman's way of controlling actually has a lot to do with that. What you did now is good. What you did then, that's bad. It's the mother's way of controlling also, when I think about it.
Maybe I can share something about the last time. Victoria and me, we spent a lot of time together in the last 6-7 weeks, and did retreats, and also were confined in a small space. And so we spent a lot of time also physically in the same room and shared the space. And it was a wonderful time for me, because I learned so much about myself, and exactly about what we are talking about right now, about the relation of men and women, and how this interaction is functioning. And actually, I could exactly what you just said, that there were a lot of times, or many, or maybe even in all the times that I reacted, it was because Victoria activated some conditioning that was from my mother, or maybe, or from my father, or from my parents. Because exactly this, oh, you did this right, you did this wrong, and I tried to make it right, and without realizing that there's no way, this doesn't lead anywhere to go along that path, because it was not actually what was happening, because it was my perception that was activated was my layer of the reality that was in front of my eyes and I couldn't see clearly. And then there were emotions activated, all this old baggage that was still there. And to slowly, it's not that you have a switch and this is like, then I see everything clear. But to slowly realize that there's something like that going on is like wow. It's like a huge comprehension. And of course, then there's still work to be done, but at least I can see it. I can start to see it. And this is a beautiful liberation also. So thank you.
What comes to me is that, in a way, the way you look at the situation is very similar to what Laura's been saying before about seeing the way you look at things and starting to distrust the credibility of your own thoughts. Because you're not saying because of Vittoria, but you're saying my conditioning is what's impacting my relationship to Vittoria. And so it's, to me, everything we've been doing the last days, looking at the ideas I have about women, the ideas I have about men, to me, they support me to take responsibility for the way I relate to others. Because I can see how my relationship to each one of you is, in a way, impacted by the image that I have about women in general, and about myself. And at the same time, the way I relate to men is impacted by this. And then by looking at my belief system, I can take responsibility for how I am reacting in life.
What I'm realizing right now is that I haven't yet surrendered.
Oh.
So I'm still fighting because I think that there's something that I can do about it. I've not given up on being able to control the way in which I'm loved. Because I have such a clear idea of the way in which love has to come for it to be real, that I'm not even allowing it to just come. So I'm basically keeping men and love outside because I want it to be like
What happens to me, that happens to me too, and sometimes I share it with Gustavo. I tell him, you didn't give me a glass of water. It's obvious that you're not considering me. I mean, there's an empty glass, there's water, you're drinking, you don't love me. And he says, yeah.
Straight to the conclusion.
Yeah, I does. And he's like, I haven't seen the glass. And I do not, and he tells me, I haven't seen the glass. I didn't know you were thirsty. He explains to me. And immediately he's like, no, it's not possible. I can see myself just not even considering that to be possible. For me, it's just that he doesn't love me. I mean, and I can see it in many things. He tells me, I didn't see this, or I did this because I love you. And it's, even though he explains it and I can like see it, the different parts, it doesn't get in. It won't. I'm like, no, I can see how I cannot let it in.
What I realized in these times, in these past months, is that my way of controlling the, how can I say, valvula? The valve of love, of receiving and manifesting more than giving, um, is is there was a fear behind. In this past month that I tried everything to control, but I still couldn't. I mean, I tried everything, and I didn't do anything during the day. Then try to control this in each way, going jogging, walking with headphones, everything. But there were moments in which the tension was very high, and I felt, and in one moment particularly, I felt exactly what I was feeling when I was a child with my father. I felt such in danger of life, of physical, of being beaten, that I contact the part of me that was hoping, that was hating my body and my material part, because my material part in that moment was, for me, was those that was bringing me that horrible moment and making me feel that horrible things. And I realized that most of my control is directed to don't feel this this kind of emotions that I'm protecting in this way. I mean, I'm keeping alive unconsciously.
And how does that somehow fit in with what you've said so often? Well, I don't know so often. You said it once, and it made you famous about running away from love.
What what I realized until now, because it's always, I mean, it's always a discovering, is that to to stay. It happens with Amalia in Barcelona one sometimes ago. I sit with her. We were outside smoking a cigarette. The night was wonderful. There was the full moon, and when the cigarette was over, I had the impulse to go back inside, as as like very functional. I go out, smoke a cigarette, and then I go back. I don't have anything to do. We were just looking at the sky. So I stay there and I start feeling her presence, her, her love. She was loving me in this moment. And this was like in a situation that can be like a microcosmos. But in a macro way, it can be a stay, for example, in a place. At the beginning, I can I can see my perspective can be conditioned. Oh, my mattress is not comfortable. Oh, so many people, and my head is. But then uh, there's something deeper that I create with that place, with people, and for me, this is love. I mean, I realize that uh, this that it I have the time to go beyond my perception and comprehend in some way inside of me. For example, what I start seeing in that situation that I lived in this past month, but that brought me to that memory, is how how high was the tension in that moment between uh, two people from with a different uh, gender, and how horrible I was feeling in that days. And I mean, my feel, I in some moment felt horrible, and how I was doing everything to reject the situation. I mean, to try to protect me. And if a person a person reacts in a way in this it was like a bomb that was exploding the situation, and so I I thought, wow, my dad was reacting in that ways, I mean, maybe the situation that was at home was was not like the like the castle of the princess. Was was I mean, what was going on maybe between he and my mother, or maybe I don't know, was very, very, very tense. And the only thing that he could do in that moment was communicating with me in that way. So, I mean, it gave me another point of view. I mean, it gave me, um, I don't know, I realized that I need time to feel and then to integrate that sensation. And then I can change perspective. And I can receive something. I can receive something that goes beyond the form, that goes beyond what I feel.
This gives me the impression that what we've said before, that we're separating the man and the father, is not the case at all the time. Which makes me realize that my controlling mind wants to catalog that the information that Laura has just shared is generally valid, that it's not always man and father in the same picture, because it seems that somehow you have made this connection, that the danger that you perceive from your father is a danger that you're perceiving from a man. Or maybe it could be the home situation also. I don't know. But
Well, I actually, yes, I have a connection. I have this connection in my mind between the man and the father. It's something that it's very near. It's not melted in one, but it's very near. Anyway, I can confirm the way of thinking of Laura and me too, because maybe there's not this big difference between man and father, but I have a catalog of different kind of men. It's like categories, really. Yes, like the album of the football players, and I say "Ti, ti, ti, ti,"
yes,
with all the conclusions that I make, of course.
And some are better than the others.
Of course.
something that I comprehended in the last couple of days that I would like to share, something that I found really embarrassing to realize about myself, and I want to share it because I feel like the more often I share, the less embarrassed I am. Let's see if that's true. I actually realized that, and I think it's from the connection of father and men. I realized that I did I did see the man as somebody who doesn't take a decision themselves. Never ever. I did perceive as like I'm choosing a man and it's my decision to choose that man, but he doesn't have any say in this and he will not choose me. So any woman can be a danger because she could choose that man and then he'll be taken away because he doesn't have a say in this. And I used to think this until really, really recently, like 3 days ago. And I found that really embarrassing. But okay.
Maybe to add something what Victoria shared before about the intense emotions that I lived. I mean, I can only talk about myself. It was almost like there was a pull, a certain conditioning inside of me that wanted this to happen, to relive it, to see it, maybe to see it from a different perspective. I don't know, but it seemed like there was a part of me that created this. and at the same time, there's the other part that wanted everything to do everything in the world just to avoid this to happen. So this is like the total, like total opposite. A total, it doesn't make sense at all from the mind, from a rational point of view, because you're trying to avoid that thing, and this is exactly what's happening. And
What is this?
yeah, for example, what she shared about this intense emotion of she felt in danger, and for me, my intense emotion that I felt was that I can do what I want. Doesn't matter. I'm just rejected. I'm like shit. Everything I do doesn't matter at all. I can like. We lived like in a 5-star hotel, beautiful room, whatever. The external doesn't matter. There's something, a pull there that wants this emotion to come out. And at the same time, everything is done to avoid that. You know, on the external, whatever I do, it does not really matter. Like, I can make a beautiful breakfast, or I don't know, it's just, or clean up the room like really super, like never before, or things that have been shared that is like, okay, this is important for me, then it's fine. And I don't know, this was not the case. There's something deeper that wanted to manifest. At the same time, the biggest fear for me was, no, I don't want to experience that. I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to be abandoned. I don't want to be, you know, and this is exactly what is happening. So, what I draw from this is that those deep roots, or I don't know how you might call them, I cannot like fight against them on the external. I cannot try to make up for them or stuff like that. It's exactly what I said in the beginning. It's more like, okay, I can observe them, I can observe this tendency, and I can allow myself not to go along with that. I can allow myself in this time not be reaction, not be a chain in this chain of reaction.
And so then, if we would go back to this exercise that we made in the workshop with Roberto, what will be the underlying belief that made you try and do something to change the situation?
The underlying belief probably might be that I have to do something right to please the woman, to do everything that she wants, and then everything will be fine. Probably something like that.
Thank you. And what comes to me now would be the idea, if you feel like to go a bit deeper into the different beliefs that we have about the man, about the woman, in this moment starting to ask you, what belief about women have you seen in that time? What is the belief that you had maybe come up in that moment that maybe yes or no you're seeing disproven, or maybe it was proven?
My belief is right now, it's just coming up, that women, or I don't know if I can generalize like that, I don't know, but in this case that I've lived, is that it is like everything is done to avoid love. Everything. It's like the worst thing. This cannot enter. It's like to feel that there's something genuine there. That this is, this is like so terrible to feel, and at the same time, I perceive it. Maybe that's not true because I cannot talk for the woman. I can only talk from my perspective. But it seems like she's running away from herself because that's her being is like love for me, because that's how I see a woman. When I look at a woman, for me, it's love. And then at the same time, my mind cannot understand how she avoids that being to express that.
I can watch 4 women in state of shock.
So then in practice, Laura, what are you doing to run away from love?
I think I said it. Cataloging the way in which, looking with distrust at the way in which it arrives. So that, let's say, if there's a triangle, and then the only thing that can fit into the triangle is a perfectly fitting triangle. So it's as if I'm looking through this triangle, and the way in which it comes is not going to fit perfectly into this triangle. Then it's like, not fitting, not fitting.
So maybe as an example, because Fabian was saying something about making a nice breakfast. Do you have a practical example? What are you rejecting?
Let's say, for example, someone brings me coffee in bed, which is something I love. And then maybe another thing that I love is receiving a flower. If I get coffee in bed, I'd say, oh, it's just part of what he does. But it's not, that's what he does. So what I receive is not the manifestation of love that I am, of course, looking for, but what he does not do is the perfect manifestation of not being loved, and that is enough. Like what Amalia was saying, like how the conclusion is reached so rapidly before you even know it. You're already at the point that you want it to be. It's not love. I'm not loved.
So you brought your
I'm
coffee.
lovable.
You brought the coffee, but not a flower, so it's not perfect.
Not even about. It's not the combination of two things. It's what you look at, where you look at, and how you look at it. So it's as if every manifestation of love is looked at in a way of saying, "Oh, he just does that because he's a good person, and he would do it for anyone." As if that's something that happens in this epicenter, that every person is brought coffee to in bed, yeah? But, and just to be clear, it's not about a flower at all. It's just I couldn't get to be honest, that's the worst thing. You ask me for a practical example, I can't even find it. But I know that there's very specific things that are not, or it's even worse. It's if I take the lead and say, I would really love if you do this, and he doesn't do it. So it's almost as if I'm preparing the stage, for the unlove to manifest. In case it doesn't manifest naturally enough, I have to, I would really love for a flower, and the flower doesn't come, you see. Maybe it's the dead of winter and there's not a single flower for 100 kilometers, and you're in confinement and don't have a car, whatever. But it's specifically what's not going to happen. Somehow.
One of the ways that we're trying to prove our beliefs. In what way are you running away from love, Amalia?
In standing my ground. In standing my ground that what the other person is doing is not love. And they cannot see that it's not love. They are blinded. They think it is worse. They think it's love. They are blinded to the fact that it's not love. They think they love me, they don't know it. They don't love me. It goes with, and I'm like, I'm going to not tell them that they don't love me because I'm not going to be, but I know them. I'm just going to let them realize it. So I'm just standing my ground like, you think you. Just, I'll wait until you realize you don't. And also, like with the water glass, I can anticipate it. Like, I bet you he's not going to give me water. If he drinks, he will not. I'm preparing the ground for failure.
Yeah. And of course, you never express it to him.
No.
You know, I love when you pour me water, when you pour me a drink. No, of course.
It's like holding that secret power.
Yeah.
So that you can continue thinking the way you want to think.
Yeah.
And it gives you some sort of power. See?
Mm.
I knew it.
Mm.
Power is another very nice keyword that we've talked about. One of the beliefs that I think Elisa has exposed first, and that at least I have as well, is that women only want to have power. And not only about the man, but also power over other women, power over the situation, power in general. I don't think it has a direction, it's just power. And as something that I saw about myself today as a manifestation of this belief, which is something that's quite silly, is we had this meeting about the virtual classroom, and it was a meeting where I was supposed to show you guys how to upload a class, basically. And in the morning before we had the meeting, Victoria came and said, "Oh yeah, we have the meeting with Amalia in whatever at some point." And in the beginning, it was a meeting that I had with Victoria and Elisa. And at that moment, suddenly it became Amalia's meeting. It was like, it took me like a few minutes because I was talking with Hernan, and so in that moment I was telling him about it, which helped me to realize what I was thinking, that a part of me was afraid that you were taking something away from me, which is ridiculous. But I saw that belief, and it's like this, for me it was important to see it in that moment, to be aware of this part of me that does want to have the power, even if it's just about a stupid meeting. You know, like this idea that I do feel this competition, and before I was never aware of it, that I do have it, and I was judging maybe other people and seeing how they got in conflict with others. One special case that we all know, I was like, but how can you be in conflict about power? And suddenly it's there. Suddenly I have it too. It's like these days, it's like all the time, like these beliefs are popping up. I'm saying, oh, yeah, I have it too.
What I realized in this power struggle, and it took me some time to realize it, was that superficially the power struggle was with another woman, someone else. But deep down, it was power struggle with myself, because I was so afraid of losing. So it's something that's fully internal, but that's projected and manifested and reflected back beautifully and perfectly by whomever is around. Practically. Fear of losing.
How so?
It can be anything.
Yeah.
It can be anything.
But how so is it with yourself, not with somebody else? It's just you with you.
Because at the end of the day, it's always with oneself. But say, for example, with the famous glass of water, yeah, it gives you certain power to know that that water glass is not going to be filled. And what would it take for you to lose the power of knowing that it's not going to be filled? it's like an opening, a vulnerability of saying, I don't know if it's going to be fueled or not.
Mm.
And whether it is or it isn't, I don't know what it means. Maybe
It's not gonna be water.
the fear of it's the fear of losing the power of being right or knowing. The fear of losing the idea that you have about yourself, that you can see what the other person in this case is not seeing.
This is amazing because it brings me exactly to a moment between this moment, these days in which, with sharing, I saw how I can talk about myself by what I perceive as a losing, as a failure. It's like the losing, I perceive it as a failure. So I do everything to don't fail. But this is why I perceive so many failures in my life, and I can't look beyond this because I stopped there. I can't look to the other side of the experience of what I brought inside my heart because everything is living still. And well, yeah, that my fear of losing comes exactly because I still have the idea of failure, of the mistake, not failure, of the mistake.
I was actually wondering, I know today there's not been comments or questions, but people who are looking at us, how do they feel about this interaction, the way that we're interacting here, the way in which someone can openly and honestly say to the person next to you, I was afraid that you're taking something away from me. And instead of the other person giving some sort of justification or excuse, just allowing that to be without any counterback. And so completely devoid of charge, because this person who's saying it is taking so full responsibility for her thought that there's no justification or, oh no, that's not what I was doing. There's no need for that. Yes, I was just wondering whether how this was perceived from the people who are looking at us, listening to us. I'm very curious.
Yeah, me too.
in this way. Because what we're doing here is, I mean, yes, we are on air, but at the same time, this is an everyday conversation.
Yeah.
Any moment, this conversation can arise. And it's beautiful because this program has given us the perfect setting to take the time to go spontaneously into these spaces that are open, instead of just keeping that process to ourselves, or like Iris said before, I was talking to Hernan about it, and it could have just stayed there because she had already sort of made peace with it. But how beautiful it is to then share it like this as a group.
For me, it was actually also really beautiful to have the chance to hear what Victoria and Fabian had to say, because we were talking about the fact that you had a difficult month being confined and like being in a small room and then doing retreats every single weekend. And I think it's beautiful that we have the space to share about this. And so what I found really amazing is actually that you are professional in the way that you did a retreat every weekend. Like you had this conflict in between the two of you, and you did manage to give a retreat and work with people every single weekend. And well, I don't know how these retreats were, but I presume that they were quite good anyway. apparently so. We had good feedback. So then I don't know if you want to share anything. Like, how is that possible?
Well, my mind does not have an answer, I think, but I feel that this was exactly everything happened exactly how it should have been happened, and a lot of those emotions and a lot of those conflicts, like we call them, for me, it's like the transformation into gratitude, because when I look at it with gratitude, I see something that maybe I've been living all my life, maybe not in that intensity, in that short space, but maybe something that is determined all my life. And when I see it's actually a gift, it's actually something I can be grateful for, because it liberates me when I take responsibility for it, when I see that it's something inside of me. And so for me, this what saved us basically, and this gratitude, and even when I go deeper, then on the core is love. I mean, it's really what carried me through was love, because I honestly love Victoria, and I honestly love doing retreats, and I love the participants. And so for me, it might sound like, it was a struggle, but no, it was actually wonderful. It was wonderful. I mean, even though it was intense, it has really a huge intensity, but it was a wonderful time for me, really. And also because, I don't know, we were not always in this, at least from my perspective, in this kind of confrontational mode. We were flowing. We had all the different, or at least me, all the different kind of states of energy that could be possible. We were hilarious. We were laughing. We were just joking, being silly. We were, I don't know, being serious. It was everything. And yeah, but there was this deep thing that wanted to come up, and then of course I'm still in it. It's not over, but I'm beginning to see it, and so for that I'm really grateful.
It's like a real life example of how so many people might be going through this period of confinement, and how when you're in an environment that has the perfect support and container so that you can consciously go in it, it is so self-fulfilling, in the sense that you're not alone, because the spaces are created where you can go into it and receive a perspective of someone who's there to support you, also to confront you. So then it's not stuck in the same cycle of thought all the time.
Yeah, in this past month, this space for me has been exactly the retreat. Because, and actually, how we were managing, how we were working in synergy together there, has been what made me stay there. Think, like, trust that voice that was saying, "There's so much more. Just there's so much more." Because before the retreat, um, we were. I mean, we had a it's like we had a mission, we had a purpose, and was in common. And before everything, also if I was feeling very triggered since the night before, we say, okay, let's try really let's try to manifest really the best part. Let's try to make this experiment for 3 days. Then on Sunday night, let's do whatever. Let's go back to whatever it's going to be. But for these 3 days, let's really create space here, most of all. And during the 3 days of retreat, really there was space. And 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 that also made me see another thing. How, if I really want, how I can make space if I want. But probably it's still very comfortable to keep being in the same structure.
The phrase that came to me when I was listening to the tutorial was that conflict arises in separation and harmony takes over in unity. How for the retreats it was so harmonious because you were working in unity with this mission.
Yeah.
And then when you forgot about the unity, the conflict could start again somehow.
Yeah. And that in this time, and that made me see another thing. How in my daily life I have I don't know why I have this need of 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 fear of staying alone. It's like the layer that I was talking at the beginning. It's like this layer I need to protect because sometimes there was the mission also to daily life. I don't know, when the border was still open, let's go shopping in Germany. That the border of Germany was very near and it's so much cheaper. So and that was the mission and was beautiful. 2 hours seems an adventure because it was super funny. But then going back home, I felt, oh my god, 2 hours together, no, go away. And yeah, it's like I was Fabian. Until tomorrow morning, I don't want to see you. But it wasn't against him. It could be almost each person because we lived something similar last year.
We did in Berlin. We had a similar
Yeah.
situation.
I had it with you. I felt this layer that was pulsing like no.
And it's very interesting to realize that it's a decision.
You just took the words out of my mouth.
We decide whether we stay in that space protecting that layer or not.
When Fabian was talking, he said very often the word when. And I always have this idea because when in German means if, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was playing this game internally. What would happen if every time he says when, which is more like a moment in time, he said if, which is more a choice, yeah? If I did this instead of when I did this, or instead of when we had a mission, if we had a mission.
Yeah.
And then I was actually wondering, because a lot of people who speak native German, they switch it around unconsciously because they think that when means if instead of when meaning when in English. So it was just this game that I was playing that brought up the same thing as Iris just mentioned about the decision of taking one attitude or another attitude. I think we're about to receive a time check here from our technical team.
In the meantime, did we have any comments or questions? Hay preguntas o comentarios que no sé quién puede leerlos en inglés o en español, claro.
There are a lot of comments. But I can't really see. So Egan said, and I'm probably not pronouncing his name right, which I'm very sorry about. I know he's from Ireland, and I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry. Egan?
Owen, I think.
It's the Irish way of writing Owen.
Oh, Owen. I'm grateful that we can all be part of it. And Daniel says, me too. This pandemic is a transformation for humanity. This discussion is actually more relevant now than ever. There's going to be an awful lot of nice guys after this pandemic has cleared over. I'm wondering what. There's a lot actually of comments.
While Laura's looking for the most relevant comments or the ones that she wants to share with us, the censorship, I just want to remind everyone that we're going to have an English round every Wednesday and every Sunday at noon. So you're always invited, obviously, to come to the ones that are directly in Spanish and translated, but on Wednesdays and Sundays, we're going to have the space directly in English. So then if you don't join the other ones, at least you can join those.
Mayana says, good morning, thank you for what you're sharing. This sensation has reached me deeply. I am me. I am my father and my mother. How I give and receive love from that part of feeling as a mother and a father. Which is interesting. Shows me the love that is within me and everywhere around me. There's also a comment about if we're ever going to tackle the issue of the subject of polyamory.
Oh, holy love.
Holy love, yeah.
Polyamory, yeah.
Which is interesting, but I think it's something that I will leave for Alberto to open. I'll be a coward.
Yeah, that's something we can definitely talk about. Which reminds me that I wanted to share that if people have topics that they would like to be tackled, we're open to receive them, and obviously we will choose when and if we can talk about something, right, Laura?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, please share anything you want that you would like, not only as a personal question, but also if you would like the subject to be approached from this perspective of a sharing amongst a group of people, and then potentially Alberto going deeper into it in the evenings. Tonight, as you might know, the subject is on the language of plants. And then the program for this upcoming week is being approved currently, so we'll very shortly be able to share it with everyone. And as of Thursday, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we'll be having another cycle of our leadership and mentoring program, where in the mornings we're going to have the mentors sharing, and then in the afternoon they'll be receiving the feedback also, which deepens into the way in which we speak, the tone in which we speak, and the words that we use, what they're really communicating beyond the actual words or beyond the significance of the actual words. And that is something that can be not only relevant if you want to be a leader or a mentor, but also in how you interact with people, men and women. Also even realizing how you can modify your language, maybe unconsciously, depending on who's there. A man, a woman, two men, a man and a woman, because difference in a group of women, a group of men, just the mere fact that you modify the way in which you speak, the way in which you move, so all this part of nonverbal communication also comes in, for us, it's being almost revolutionary to see what we're really saying when we're saying, or when we think we're saying. But in reality, we're saying something completely different. So that will be Thursday to Sunday also.
it came to me that what we are actually saying, with what we say, is the belief we have about ourselves, such as men, what they show, what it's not what they think they're showing, it's the belief they have about themselves, which comes from what women think about them.
And what their mother thought about them. The original woman.
Original.
So what are plants saying then?
We'll have to wait for tonight. And see in which way they're saying it too.
If anyone wants to play a song, I don't know, Amalia, if you want to
can all
join in.
sing.
You can all sing. Sure.
Then I want to thank everyone here.
Yeah.
Also the technical team, for whom it might be just slightly harder to keep track of us when we're not even speaking a language that they necessarily speak fluently. And thanks everyone who's listening, who's following us, and I hope that we can continue sharing ourselves more and more. We've opened a YouTube channel where you can see the morning emissions whenever you want. Eventbrite allows you to watch it for 24 hours on replay, but now on YouTube they'll be permanently there. I think maybe Hernan is going to show the YouTube link address at the end, maybe not, or maybe the moderator can put the link to the YouTube channel on the chat. I think it's Christian who's moderating the chat. So it would be beautiful if you can also follow us on YouTube like that. You can keep track of everything that we're sharing and watch it at your own leisure. Thank you, everyone, for watching, for listening, for being part of this. And we will see each other tonight in open space.